Hey guys, this is Rob. In this deep dive video, we're going to look at view range and how it affects the views in our model. That third dimension adds a lot of complexity to views in Revit, so I'm going to try to cover this comprehensively with some examples, and at the end show you some pitfalls that you can realize in real world applications. So let's get started. What is view range? Back in CAD days, we didn't worry about that. The architect sent us a floor plan that behind the scenes was already cut. It was already determined what should show up in the floor plan. And what I mean is, it already included walls. It already included doors. It included windows. So it included all the architectural pieces that we needed for that floor, and the architect decided which of those pieces to show on that plan. Now with Revit, we get the architectural model. We have the choice of what to show on each of our views. So I like to look at view range similar to a section cut. We're all familiar with section cuts. We've used those, in CAD forever. So if we look at this floor plan for our sample project, and if we cut a section, you can see this section cut right here through the building. We are familiar with what that does. It cuts these walls and shows them. For example, here, that's the cut that we did, the section. It shows the walls cut, just like taking a saw through the building, and we're familiar with that. It also contains things like how deep into that cut do we see. For example, look at this loading zone right here, this loading room. This dashed line is part of this section cut. It determines how deep into that room, if you will, how far into the room we see items. So if the line only extends, the cut only extends a few feet, and over here it's called far clip offset. So that clip offset is only 2 feet and 3 inches or so. We are not going to see this corner because we're looking up the page. You look up the page, you look in the loading area, which happens to be first floor down here, you don't see that wall. If I was to extend this cut beyond that wall, now I'm looking about 4 feet into the space, we should see this vertical line for that wall. And right here, here's that vertical line. So the depth of this section affects what we see. And just to further reinforce that idea, let me drag it clear up beyond. This happens to be an overhead door. Now we can see the overhead door right here in that section. So that is what we are familiar with sections. And we really only have two things. The cut, I'll call this the cut plane or the cut line. And this would be the depth of the view. So now let's go into this section, and let's say now we want to take this vertical section and we want to cut it horizontally to create a floor plan section, if you will. So what I've done here is I've taken the same section and I've put in what looks like a section cut, but this is going to be a horizontal section cut, which acts like a cut for our floor plan and our view range. So this line here is where I'm cutting my walls to see them in plan view. And it has a height above the level I'm talking about. In this one here, you can see I'm looking at level 1. And we can move these so they're not over top of the other ones. But that's my cut plane. And what I'm going to do is let me change this line type to be I created one called a cut plane. So a nice big pink dash dot line. That's the cut plane. And that determines what we see in the floor plan. That is one piece of the view range. Another piece of the view range is kind of the depth. Now on a floor plan, we are looking down. We're looking down onto the floor. So we have a cut line looking down. So how far down do you want to look? Well, this is similar to the section where we had this line here, which I'm calling the bottom plane. That's the extent of how far we see. Typically, you would put that to the actual floor level. Now, how much above this cut plane do we want to see in our floor plan? Well, now we have what's called a top, the top plane, which is represented here by this blue dash. And we can move that around too. Now, we can't do it graphically in Revit like this, like we can with a section. We have to do it numerically. So that lends to some confusion and complication. But this at least shows you the concept that we have a range, a bottom of the range, a cut plane, and a top plane. Let me show you how Autodesk explains this to us. Again, these are being done in 2020. It's similar in newer versions. But this is Autodesk's help and about the view range. So I'm going to go through this a little bit. They do similar to what I've done. They show these cut lines and they tell you what they are. You can read through this and get an explanation. But the main idea is every plan view has a property called view range, also known as visible range. The horizontal planes that define the view range are top, cut plane, and bottom, which we just talked about. Top, cut plane, and bottom. The top and bottom represent the topmost and bottommost portions of the view range. The cut plane is the plane that determines the height at which certain elements in the view are shown as cut. Well, what does that mean? Well, architects typically show cut elements like a cut wall with a thicker line type than a projected wall or projected item. And so what that means is back in our plan view, cut elements may have a thicker line type than others. And we can see a little bit here. This is a little thicker here than those lines. And so that changes how things look. Another thing they talk about is that not every item in this model is cut or shown differently the same. The best way to show you that is under Manage, and we haven't learned all this yet, but under Manage, if you go to Object Styles, this gives you a listing of all the categories in your model, not the annotations, but the model objects. It tells you the line weight for the projection or the cut. So if you cut a wall, let's go down to wall. I could just do this and type W. Go down to walls. In this view, they're showing projection and cut are the same line type. A lot of times an architect will have this as a different line type. Let's go with 5. If we do that, then we will probably see these walls. They're a little wider right now. See, the cuts are wider. But what this shows you is some items are hatched out. There's no cut. So it doesn't show a difference between a cut cable tray or a cut communication device or conduit fittings or conduits. There's no different line type for these. So certain items, mainly MEP items, are shown, are done differently when they're cut than architectural items. So you won't see a difference when you start cutting ductwork or, in our case, cutting conduits and cutting panel boards. So that's kind of what's going on there. And they explain that elements display in the plan view using the cut line weight, projection line weight, or the beyond line style. Now the beyond, that's the next piece. There's one more plane to deal with. And it's this guy here. Below the bottom, there is yet another plane, and that one is called the view depth 6. The 6 here is the view depth for that view depth plane. This will let you see things below your bottom line, which is usually floor, things like the foundation, slabs and foundations. And even if we put conduits underground, we can see those in this view depth. So there's one more piece to this view range called view depth. And I have that on here down this green line. That is shown here on the green line. It's called the view depth. So that controls what we see below, only for certain items. This all gets very tricky on how it performs, and the best advice I can give is to take some time to experiment, play around with these settings. Well, how do we get to these settings? Haven't even shown that yet. Let's look at how we do that. Typically, we have them included in the view template. If you click on the view template for Power Plan, you will see view range, edit, and this means it's included within this view template, view range. Now, to experiment, I'm going to uncheck that, take it out of the view template, and just let me change view range on my own for experimental reasons. Now, once you get it set, I would recommend keeping it in the view template so that all of your views using this template are the same. But for experimental purposes, I'm going to take view range out of it. So now I can actually get to view range directly. So this is set up right now. Let's look at the view range. Here's the things I was talking about. We've got the top, we've got the cut plane, we've got the bottom. Here's those three lines we were talking about. And then we have that fourth line called the view depth that goes way down below the bottom. So what are they set at? Well, you have a choice you can set them at the associated level. If the top is at the associated level, there's not much to see. We're not looking high enough. We can go with level above. In this case, it's level 2. We can even go further. We can even go unlimited. So there's a number of things we can choose for top. Now, not only do we have the level itself based on built-in levels, we can apply an offset above or below that level. So for example, right now it's set up for the top is a level above, which is level 2 in this case, but I want it -3 inches. So my top is actually level above, level 2, -3 inches. And I'll show you why I have that 3 inches later. But if we go back to this section, my top plane, you can see level 2 is up here, and my top plane is about 3 inches below. Let's look at the rest. The cut plane itself is always relative to the associated level. It's grayed out. I can't change that. But I can change the offset. Where do I want that cut plane to occur? Well, it's set in this template as 4 feet above our level. So as we see in this cut plane is about 4 feet above level 1. So it's cutting windows, it's cutting walls, it's cutting doors, it's cutting the stuff I need to see. We'll experiment with that, see what that does. And then, of course, we go back to the bottom of it. We have associated level 01, and we just have it at 0, right at the floor line of this level. Now, the view depth, in this case, I'm not looking below the floor. Now, in some cases, I do want to look below the floor, especially, for example, that this is level 1. This is our floor level. I may want to see foundations. I may want to see my conduits below that. So this, a lot of times, will be different on level 1 than it will be on other levels. And that's the other thing to pay attention to, is that you will quite often have separate view templates for certain levels. And we haven't gone there yet in this sample, but in many projects, real world, you'll have to have a separate level 1 template, level 2 through 8, for example, template, and then you will have a different template even for the roof. Or if some of your other floors have different things going on. You may have different view ranges with different templates, but that's what all these pieces mean. So how do these affect us? For example, let us change the cut plane of this level. And let me zoom into the windows right here. These windows, if I look in my section, these windows start a couple feet above the floor. This is a window. So if I was to move my cut plane way down here, I'm doing this graphically just to show you. You can't really do that in Revit. You have to type it in. So let us go to the view range and put my cut plane down at 1 foot. 1 foot. My window disappeared because I'm not cutting through the window like a section. So where you cut determines what you see. So we will go back, for graphical reasons, we'll show this up here. Let's go back and move our cut plane back up to around 4 feet. And now we can see our windows. So you can play around with cut plane to get things to look differently. So remember that. Also, you want your top to be at a certain place. If I was to make the top view, let's try that. Make the top view now at exactly level 2. So no offset, just right at level 2. Apply that, okay. Oh, something just jumped into this art space. What are these? Click on that. It's our floor box receptacle on level 2, and it's at 0, right at level 2. Well, our floor box family actually is in 3 dimensions. It extends a couple inches below the floor. So my view range of level 1 is set to level 2 so I can see that floor box sticking down below the floor. Well, I don't want to see that in level 1. So that is where we go in and pull that top view a few inches below level 2. Now 1 inch, I have to do negative. 1 inch below doesn't quite do it. Well, the box happens to be a couple inches deep. So let me go to about 3 inches. Minus 3 inches. And now they disappear. And you might say, why not just pull it a foot or 2 below? You can. It doesn't affect us as much in this power plan, which is a floor plan view, as it would in a ceiling plan view, which we're going to show next. Remember, ceiling plans are different. They look up instead of down, so that's a whole nother category. So that is the basics of how this view range works. And again, I recommend experimenting with it. Set the bottom at different levels, set the top, set the cut plane, and just see what it does. Now let me show you how that affects a ceiling plan. This is our lighting plan, which is based upon a ceiling plan, as you see over here. So it is similar to this, but it's looking up at the ceiling, and it's reflected like off the floor, but it's like we're looking up. So it behaves a little differently. Let me pull the view range out of this template again, like I did for the floor plan to experiment. So I'm unlinking this view range from the view template. Now I can play with the view range. Right now I've got the top set at level 2, so I can see all the way up to level 2. Now view depth in a ceiling plan is the opposite of a floor plan. So the view depth in a ceiling plan ends up being above the top plane. So we have to keep that in mind. We have a top plane that we can see further beyond the top plane. So keep that in mind as you do this. What I'm going to do is, right now, I can see my ceiling. I can see my lights on the ceiling. Let's right click this and do a create similar. This is a It's not ceiling hosted, it's a face hosted. So place on face, and it can see the ceiling. So I can place my light on these ceilings because my view range is set up to see the ceiling. So for example, if I set that there and then I click on it, see it mounted at 14 feet 11, whatever. It's almost, exactly at the next level. If I was to play around with the view range and bring my top down, now you can either have it based on the level above, or I can actually base it on level 1. Let's say I'm going to set an absolute offset height above level 1 that I want my top to be at. I'm only going to look 5 feet. And I need to make my view depth also the same. Otherwise, I will see beyond my top. So now I have the top and the view depth all set at 5 feet above level 1. If I do that now, of course, I can't see my lights. I can't even see the ceiling. So I can't even place a light. Let's go down and try to place a light fixture. And this happens in the real world many times where you can't find your ceiling. So let's put a recessed downlight. Face. I get the no entry sign. I cannot find a ceiling. I might be able to find a header or some piece of a door, or maybe I'm in the cabinet right now, but I can't get to my ceilings because my view range prohibits me from seeing those ceilings. So if you're having trouble finding ceilings, that could be a culprit. So let's go back to the view range. Let's set it to exactly the level above. Now, sometimes if you do these, you're going to get errors. For example, right here, the view depth plane is set below the top clip plane. So my view depth is set below the top. Well, as we saw in the diagram, the view depth has to be at the top or above. So let's set it the same. Let's go to level above, level 2, 0 offset. So it's exactly the same as the top. Now we can see all of our pieces. We can see, and on that one, we're going clear up to the level above. We're not worried about seeing things above. If you have, let's say, lighting that for some reason, let's say it's floor lighting. You've got some step lights or floor mounted lighting. We may want to reduce this top plane for the same reason we did the power. But that's how that affects that. So that is the basics of the view range. Now, not every building, as we know, has a nice level, always the same level floor, and a nice level ceiling that's always the same. Multifamily like this typically has things like that. But sometimes you'll run into a room, let's say that is an atrium or an entry that is twice as high. So let's say this retail space is, 2 stories. How do I see the second floor? Maybe it's a story and a half. Maybe there's a mezzanine above it or something. How can I set up the view range of just this one room? Or down here in my elevator pits. Right now I have GFI called out on what? There's no receptacles. Well, my receptacles happen to be 2 feet below the floor in elevator pit. Well, do I go over and change my view range, the bottom to be below level 1? Well, I don't want to see the foundations and everything underneath this, whole plan. I don't want the whole plan being below the level. I only want a certain area to be below level. Well, how do I do that? Well, there's a thing called, under views, it's called the plan region. This is an amazing tool for letting us sketch a closed region within a plan and specify a different view range to display inserts above or below the cut plane. Multiple plan regions in a view can't overlap, but they can have coincident edges. So when I need to change the view range of a portion of my plan, this is how you do it. You create a plan region. So what I'm going to do is create a plan region in this elevator hoist way so I can see what's going on down in the pit. So plan region, and it puts you in sketch mode. You can see by the X and check. Now we can draw with a rectangle if it's rectangular, or lines. We can even pick lines if we want to just pick certain things. I just get approximate. So I'm just going to take the rectangle and I'm going to kind of draw what I think will cover my elevator. Do that. So I've drawn that in. I haven't completed it yet. I can specify now the view range for just this little region. View range. It takes on the view range that I had before, but I want to change this. I want to change the bottom of this at level 1. I'm going to go 5 feet below because I know my pit is 5 foot deep. Let's put a minus. -5. And the view depth also -5. And the cut plane I want to be down below the floor. Let's go -2. And then I have to accept it for it to work. So now you can see my receptacles popped. These guys are 1 foot below level 1. Now they show up. So you can see the power of this plan region for seeing things above and below. I know that our plumbing and mechanical folks use it sometimes on walls if they want to see, roof items, scuppers, things that are higher than the next level. So you can use that plan region to pop up or pop down areas that you need to see differently. One more real life example I'd like to talk about is, again, when we deal with this view range, whether we go with a level above or whether we go with our level and give it an absolute height. On some projects, there are floors in between our main floors. Back to section 9. You can see here, we have level 1, level 02, and in the middle we have a level 01 slat ceiling and level 01 soffit datum. There's some levels in between. Now, we didn't really need to put these in our model, but sometimes we have to. We've got projects that are multiple buildings with multiple level 1s, a north level 1, a south level 1, and they're at different levels. Now, these levels extend throughout the entire project. So if I was just to say, make the top of my floor plan at level above, the level above may be the south level 1, not the level 2 that I need in my plan. So it's very important to watch for those situations. And I know a number of people will just use the associated level, put in an actual offset. They'll look at the section. They see that we have 15 feet to the next floor. They'll just say, let's just go 14 feet. And put in absolute heights instead of relative levels to the next floor. So I hope this helps explain the complicated subject of view range. I, again, recommend that you experiment with it. Take a look at the in-depth description in the Autodesk help. And I wish you luck. Until next time.